We can't hear you. Do a mic check.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I am Candace Ruiz, formerly Candace Cornell. I am the second child of Art and Joan Cornell. Welcome. And I am here to do a acknowledgement. A territorial or land acknowledgement is an act of reconciliation that involves making a statement recognizing the traditional territory of the indigenous people who called the land home before the arrival of settlers. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe, and other indigenous people. Thank you. I welcome you, my father, Art Cornell.
Thank you, Candace.
You're welcome.
All right. And welcome all of you this evening for this, it's informal talk. It's not going to be real formal, okay? All right, so, but it's going to be mainly about my great-grandparents, but I've thought about, over the years, about the ancestors before them. And over every 20 years, there was going back another generation, every 20. So in 100 years ago, there was, you go back 5 generations. If you went back 1,000 years, there'd be 50 generations back. And you wonder about those people back there. 50 generations back, a man and a woman, a mother, father, they had a child, and that child grew up, and they found a mate, and they had a child, and so on. What do we know about those ancestors back there 1,000 years ago? Where did they live? And what did they do? Did they live in houses or what? We know nothing about them. But we know a little bit about James and Elizabeth, James Cornell and Elizabeth Jane Southard. So this is going to be a talk about them and about my grandparents and my parents and St. Martin Island. So my great-grandparents were James Cornell and Elizabeth Jane Southard. And they were both born in 1811. We know some of these things because of census records and Bible records and so forth like this. We've never been able to talk to any of them, James and Elizabeth. But anyway, we have their marriage record from 1829 in Lewiston, New York. And it was soon afterwards, we know that they traveled to Pontiac, Michigan. And they had 4 children there in Pontiac: Joseph, Thomas, Mary, Elizabeth, and Jane. Now, Joseph was born in 1830, you know, just a year after they married. You know, that they had to have moved very soon after they married. So, you can see on this map, you can see up in there, way up in the upper right corner is Lewiston. It's right near Niagara Falls. Now, I'm talking loud enough, aren't I?
Yes.
Okay. And it's almost certain that they traveled by boat to Detroit area, and somewhere or another got to Pontiac, which is a bit inland. But they lived there till 1837. And in 1837, they returned to Lewiston. Why? Well, I did not know why they moved, but Candace, who is here tonight, did some research on that, and she found out that that area had a famine. Apparently, a huge number of people moved into that area, and so many people that they were not able to feed them. And therefore, it wasn't long, and James and Elizabeth decided to go back to Lewiston. So here they go, back to Lewiston, and they, every 2 years, they had another child. And so Mary Ann, they had 5 more children from 38 to 48. Mary Ann, Margaret, James Jr., John Wooler, and William. And of course, William is my grandfather. And he was born in 1848. So, with their 9 children now, in 1848, 1849, oh, let's get on the move. We're getting tired of Lewiston, or whatever reason. We can surmise all sorts of things, but off they go to Lamont, Illinois. And I surmise, because there were no railroads at this time going around by there, that they went by boat. And they would have gone through Lake Erie, up Lake Huron, and Lake Michigan, right by Washington Island, where we are right now. And on down to the Chicago area, where Lamont is inland a few miles. And that's where they went. And they had in the 1850 census, there they are listed, that James and Elizabeth and their 9 children. And there they are. Why did they go to Lamont? It was always a question. Oh, one other thing I want to mention is that in the census, they were living there with their 9 children and 5 boarders. They must have had a big house for all this. The 5 boarders were lawyers. They were listed in the census as lawyers. So here they are. Why did they move in the first place to there? Well, in the census records, I found that nearby there was a couple by the name of Southard, and Elizabeth Jane, her maiden name was Southard. So I think maybe they had gotten mail from the people living there saying, oh, this is a great area, why don't you come west? And that's might be why they went to Lamont, Illinois. But in 1850, the eldest son, Joseph, went fishing with a crew. They called a group there that went fishing up north, the Illinois colony, and he went up fishing with those groups. And another assumption, surmising, is that, oh, he comes back home with a whole bunch of money. Well, all this money, gosh, you can make all kinds of money, a lot more money than farming in Illinois. So let's go up to Rock Island. All of us kind of know about Rock Island, or at least most of us know it because we were out there yesterday. So anyway, up they move in 1851, the next year, with their 9 children. Up to go fishing on this little bitty island. I don't think I would have done it, but they did. So here is a little map of the area, and of course you can see Washington Island and Rock, and one thing I wanted to point out, because I'm going to be talking about it a little later, is way up at the top in the middle. Do you see Gladstone? Well, that's my hometown. Okay, so that's where I grew up, in Gladstone. So also next to Rock Island, going up a little north, is St. Martin Island. And St. Martin Island became very important to the Cornells. They heard about this great fishing out there. Oh, it was practically uninhabited. Well, there were lots of trees for making houses. Well, let's go up to St. Martin Island. And off they went in 1852. build their houses, okay. But 1853, their 10th child came along, Uretta. And so for the next 10 years, they lived on St. Martin Island. And they built houses, they fished, and they made barrels to put the fish in, and salt, added the salt to it, and sent those barrels to Green Bay and to Chicago to make money. And so I guess they made a lot of money. Oh, wow. Anyway, in 1860, James and Elizabeth were on St. Martin Island living in a house with 4 of their children on St. Martin Island. And nearby, their other 6 children were married and living, they were all living, all 10 of the children were living on St. Martin Island. September 1860, Charles Harrison Root was born, one of their grandchildren. Now I put that on there because Janice, who is here tonight, Charles Harrison Root is her great-grandfather. So, the Cornells who lived on St. Martin Island were James and Elizabeth. That's 2 of them. And 10 of their children, 30 of their grandchildren lived on and 2 of their great-grandchildren, and 8 spouses, for a total of 52 Cornells living that lived on St. Martin Island. Pretty good percentage of the ones living on I think it was maybe 100 to 150 that ever lived there. So that was a pretty good percentage. This is the ones that were born. One child, Uretta, I mentioned. There were 23 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren for a total of 26 that without any doctors, and I don't know who were the midwives and those that helped with the delivery became midwives, I guess. In 1860, according to the census, there was James and Elizabeth, all 10 of the children, 6 of the spouses, and 11 grandchildren for a total of 29 in 1860. In 1870, 10 years later, there were just 3 children there. James and Elizabeth had moved to Washington Island. And so here so just 3 of their children, 3 of James and Elizabeth's children were still living on St. Martin Island, 10 of the grandchildren, 3 of the spouses, for a total of 16 still living in 1870. Now, what is also interesting is that in 1870, Mary Elizabeth Spaulding, who was a great granddaughter of James and Elizabeth, was born on St. Martin Island. And then there is Margaret Joshua, I guess that's how you say it, Katie. She was one of the grandchildren, not the great-grandchildren, but one of the grandchildren that was born in 1878 on the island. And then the second great-grandchild in 1879 was Emily Augusta Hazen. So that's, and it was around 1880 or a year or two later that they were all gone from St. Martin Island, all of the Cornells. All right, now I've listed the 10 children of James and Elizabeth. And the number of children that they had, notice Joseph had 11, and William had 11. Uretta had 12, but it was a total of 82 grandchildren that they had. And notice the age at passing of them. There were 4 of them out of the 10 lived into their 90s. Only one lived longer than me, though. Okay, so you can see 1, 2, 3 of them lived to be into their 80s. Pretty good life. What do you call that?
Longevity.
Whatever.
Wait, go back.
This is William Cornell, and that's my great grandfather. Okay, and then
No,
this is my great grandfather, James.
It's your grandfather, isn't it?
No, this is my great grandfather.
Oh, this
William.
This is James.
That's you.
What?
Picture.
What?
Look at that red beard.
What's this chuckling about? He's a very handsome guy.
The next sweater.
What?
No, go to the other picture that you were on before.
Go to
Go
William.
back one.
William.
So is that your grandfather?
That's my grandfather.
You said that was your great grandfather.
No, grandfather.
Oh, okay.
And this is my great grandfather. He's very honest looking, very wise looking.
They had polyester yarn back then.
Yeah.
Well, I can't hear.
They had polyester yarn back then. What's all this?
Craig, that's dope.
Yeah, there's another photo before.
That's really a picture of me.
Oh.
Oh,
Really? No way.
Yes, it was.
I have to get a little bit of humor in there. Oh, this is James and Elizabeth's house on St. Martin Island. Well, maybe it's their house. Anyway, this is a picture that we took of the ruins of a house on St. Martin Island the picture we took in 1992 when we were there. You can see the lath there. So on the inside, you know that they had lath and plaster in the house. It's interesting that they had that on the houses on St. Martin Island. here is a picture of a few rocks like they are on Schoolhouse Beach that you saw today. It goes around there, and there are probably about 3 or 4 times as many rocks along there as on Schoolhouse Beach. It is illegal to take them from Schoolhouse Beach, but I gathered a couple of them from here, and they are now on Cape Cod. Oh, we did some survey there, and here's one of the workers on the survey.
Very happy.
She's very enthusiastic, you can tell. And here is a sketch of the survey that was done by Jonathan. And you can see over to the left, you can see the various points. Well, first of all, way down at the bottom, the part that sticks out there is the dock, where tomorrow many of us are going out to St. Martin Island, and we will dock right there. Okay? But you can see up further now, it shows the runes. You can't see the details, but in the actual thing, while you can see the numbers and so forth of the runes there. Way over on the right-hand side, up towards the top, is the cemetery over there. And do you see the double line going up towards the ruins? See, can you see that?
Yes.
That double line? Well, right at the end, towards the end of the double line is where we did the archaeological dig. And what we did was we had an area 6 feet by 3 feet that we found there were no trees, so and just grass growing. So we thought, we'll mark that out, a 6 foot by 3 foot area, and we would divide it up into 18 1-foot squares, and we would dig up 1 square at a time, and any artifacts that we happen to find in that 1-foot square, we would put it in a bag. So we had bags numbered 1 through 18. And by the end of the thing, you can see we did this on August the 27th, 1992, and here's the squares, 18 squares, and you can see the total of artifacts that we got out of there was 165 out of this little area. Of the whole island, 165. Look at pottery, there was glass, other metal things. We found buttons and bones and stuff. It's amazing what we found. And then, should I tell about the box that we found?
Who did you go to? Who went on this trip? Who went on the trip with you?
Oh,
Would you
so you say
Yes.
we, but some people don't know.
Yes, there were 4 of us that went on this trip. And we stayed for 5 days on State Martin Island, touring around and doing the archaeological and surveying and so forth. And one of them was my daughter here, and where's John?
Back here.
Oh, and Jonathan, and my wife, Joan, and myself. The 4 of us went there. And we were digging up one of the things, and my gosh, here's a metal box there. And just then, I was doing the digging, and just then, why, Kristen and Jonathan had been someplace, and they came, and they looking, sees the box, and I opened it up, and it turned out there was a comb from the American Airlines. My daughter, Kristen, worked for American Airlines.
And I'm like, how did that get there?
Anyway, we had a few laughs over that. All right, now we have there the James and Elizabeth and their 10 children. Okay, now over there, William, over on the right-hand side, you see that there's J.W. and Felix. Actually, William had 11 children. The 11th one was what was her name?
You read it.
Agnes.
Agnes.
Oh,
Agnes. And Agnes, it was the last one, and she is the one that disappeared at age 16, never to be seen again, and she is the one that I wrote the book about. And it's one of the best books I've ever read. Anyway, I've just, on here, I've just written down 2 of William's children, because I didn't have room for all 11. So I just wrote J.W. Now, that J.W. is really John William, but he was always known as J.W. And now, J.W. had a daughter, Mary, and Mary had a daughter, Mary Jo. Mary Jo?
Yes.
Would you stand up, please? And J.W. also had a son, William, and William had a daughter, Harriet, and Harriet had a son, Eric, and Eric is here today. You can stand there. And then Felix had actually 3 children, but I just have listed 2 of them, myself and Lillian, my sister. And Lillian had a daughter, Tanya. Tanya is here tonight. Could you stand, Tanya? Okay, and then, of course, me, and I'm standing. But I had 4 children. I don't have room to put all of them on. I had 4 children, and could the 4 of you, all 4 of you are here tonight, could the 4 of you stand up, please? And they have children, and there are 9 of them. 9 of them all together. Hey, could you, the 9 of you stand up? They're all here.
No, one went back, one went back.
It's 8
Maggie.
here.
Oh, yeah. There's only 8 here. Oh, well. Okay, and then there is Mary Elizabeth, and there was, Mary Elizabeth had Charles Root, and Charles Root had William Root, and William Root had Mary Root, and Mary Root had Janice. Oh, Janice is here. Well, and then there's, of course, Joseph over here and Mary Ann over there. Now, Joseph had Alfred. Alfred had Milton. Milton had Jacqueline. And then Mary Ann over here had James Boyce. James Boyce had Mary Boyce. And Douglas Foss had Douglas Foss. And Douglas Foss and Jacqueline over there married, and they had Kirby. And Kirby is here tonight. You can tell by looking at this that Kirby is more Cornell than any of them. So, oh, here's a collage of photographs. Now, you see James, William up there. And way over on the left is his wife, Hannah.
Yeah.
Okay? And Hannah, well, Barbara knows more about Hannah than any of us. Where's, oh, yes.
I don't know.
What? You played her part.
I played her part in the cemetery, but I don't remember what I said.
Anyway, William died at age 40 of, I guess, an appendix or something. Anyway, a few years later, in about 1890, Jesse Minor, the lighthouse keeper out on Rock Island, wrote in his logbook that Mrs. Cornell went home today. Well, it didn't say when she came how long she had been there. They eventually got married, but they were not married at that time. Who? Risque. Anyway,
Children with her, though.
a few years later, Hannah married the lighthouse keeper, Jesse Minor.
But it reminds us how many children Hannah had.
Say it again.
How many children did Hannah have when she
Oh,
got married?
yeah, when she got married to Jesse Minor was 45 years old and a bachelor. He had never gotten married. And she had like 6 or 7 children under the age of 17 at that time that they got married. So it was not a scandal, I guess, but it was famous. So, and so then, the little picture of the man there is my father, Felix. Oh, I wanted to say one other thing is that Jesse Minor in the logbook put down that Felix and Arthur went to get the mail today. Well, there could be no one other than my father and Arthur, his brother, who I was named after, that were there living on that island, staying overnight with Jesse Minor. And a few years later, why my father is growing up, does some lumberjacking in the Upper Peninsula, but eventually he goes on a circus thing down south, and he got mugged, and his skull was fractured, and he was in pretty bad shape for a while, and his brother, Zarasco Paul Cornell, came down to Augusta, Georgia, and got him, and brought him back to that house right there. That house is in Gladstone, Michigan. And so he's back there recuperating. At the same time, the woman in the picture, who is my mother, had a goiter. I don't know if you all know what a goiter is, but it's an overactive thyroid because of not having iodine in the diet, which is very common here in the Midwest in the water. But nowadays they put iodine in the salt, so there's no problem. But back then, because there was no iodine, you got a goiter, and it took way out, and my mother went to the Mayo Brothers in Rochester, Minnesota. This is in 1911, and had the goiter removed, and afterwards, why she goes to her sister's house, that house right there. Brothers married sisters. Okay? My mother and father, my father is married, his brother is Zarasco, and my mother was Aunt Jemima, Aunt Jane, that we called her. And they were married, so it turned out that brothers married sisters. So that's, the picture up above, way over on the left of the picture, is my father in a wood pile. They had pretty big wood piles back then.
Which one is he? Isn't he in the far, on that picture, he's in the far left, right?
He's in the far left, yes. Okay, now, this is my mother and father. They had 3 children. And I've already talked about Lillian. Lillian had Tanya. And she's, of course, in the middle. And over on the right there is my brother, Felix. Felix, he didn't like Felix because it was like Felix the cat, and he was always referred to as Phil. And then there, one over on the other side, of course, is me. And I have those guns, and I hate guns. You all know that I hate young. But over there is me too. You notice that the color of the hair is the same, it hasn't changed in all these years. Well, all right. I don't know if all of you know it, but we put the Cornell book that I wrote on the internet along with the addendums, and all you have to do is put this into the computer and you can get the Cornell book, see at any page that you want to. And it turns out that the photographs on this are better than the book because of the technology is better now than when the book was published in '02. So I guess, let's see, what's next? Oh! Are there any questions?
I have a couple, Art.
Yes.
So you said that they arrived on St. Martin Island in 1851, 52?
50, St. Martin and 52, yeah.
And it was almost uninhabited at that time?
Pretty much. There were, I don't think there were any Indians there. They had chased them all away. Oh,
No, there were a number of fishermen.
there were a number of still fishing around that way?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But then you referenced the census of 1860 and how many people were on the island. So that suggests there was some governmental authority or organization. So could you just show up and build a boat and build a house and start fishing? Is that what they did?
Yeah.
Was it like pioneer
They
territory?
were squatters. for the
You
most
just
part.
arrive and you can do this, okay. And then did they have to build their own boats, make their own nets, get their whole thing going on their own?
Oh, well, I guess the nets, they could buy the.
Yeah, there were companies that would
Twine.
sell the twine and, you know, the material that you would use to actually make the gill net.
Oh, okay,
You know, it would come in spools, but they actually made them.
they made them. And then how did they get the fish that they were fishing for to market? How did you get them from St. Martin Island to
Oh,
Chicago?
boats would come by,
And buy them from them?
right by, and, I'm not sure.
Yeah, there were small schooners that would go from island to island and pick up the barrels of fish like every other day. You know, there was enough.
Can you all hear?
There's enough.
Probably knows.
There's enough commerce, you know, that supported that waterborne transportation.
And then what?
And they wouldn't buy them from them. They were just hauling them.
Oh, they were hauling them?
Right,
Oh.
they'd haul them to some fish wholesaler in Green Bay or, you know.
So they were transporting them?
Right.
Okay, got it.
But also keep in mind that those barrels were much smaller than what we think of as a barrel now.
Okay.
They weren't 55 gallons. Like,
Okay.
what, 30, something like that?
Oh, not even that big,
This size.
yeah.
Something that you could lift
Like
and you
maybe,
could carry?
yeah, 20,
Yeah.
25.
Weren't some of them called packets?
It's the same thing,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And trout was the king.
Trout?
And they could also fish them with hook and line.
But that would be pretty slow to get a catch of fish like
Well,
that, right?
they were so prevalent then that.
Oh, you were able to do that, good. So Art, you also referenced Pontiac and a famine in 1837. And that's so close to Detroit, which would be a pretty major town or city. You would have imagined that they would have been able to be fed by the city, they were close by to the city, but they had to leave and go back to New York, which seems kind of strange.
Well,
Back then,
maybe you can comment on
my
that.
understanding is back then there was no road from
it was all, Michigan was all swamp down in that area. And they didn't even have a road from Detroit to Pontiac. They actually, they would go up on the Lake St. Clair, I guess it would be, right? Up on Lake St. Clair to, I can't remember the name of it, there's a river that goes to Mount Clemens and then to Rochester, and then they'd have to take a wagon from Rochester to Pontiac. And it was really hard to get to Pontiac. It wasn't, I don't understand why they even settled it at that time, you know, because it wasn't near water. And when they finally did build a road between Detroit and Pontiac, it was all swamp, and the only way they could do it was to build a corduroy road out of logs.
Oh.
But I think that was long after they left.
So if there was no food for the people there, they just had to leave,
There was,
basically.
and the other problem was there was a big influenza outbreak about the time that they left also.
Oh.
So, yeah, it was probably a combination of things.
I have something else to comment on Pontiac. We lived about maybe 10 miles south of Pontiac, where our 4 children were brought up in Michigan, just 10 miles from Pontiac. That's where we lived and our children were brought up. 2 of our children were born in Pontiac. So here was James and Elizabeth, 4 of theirs, but only 2 of ours. Craig and Kristen were there. So that's interesting. Yes.
How many fish would they generally get per day? Was there any sort of limit? And
How many?
how many fish could they get in one day if they were fishing with a net versus a line?
I don't
Kirby
got
Bear?
any idea?
Well, for
Kirby?
one thing, there was no limit. You can catch as much as you can handle.
Yeah. Yes.
I saw that when you were getting the artifacts, you listed a stone as other, and I was wondering what made this stone so distinctive that it wouldn't be.
That's another little interesting story. That when we gathered up what we thought were artifacts and put them in the bag, and I took them home to New Jersey where we were living and washed them up, and we looked at some of them and they were not. We thought they might be pottery, but they weren't pottery, they were stones. And, but they were different, you know, they round, smooth stones that are along Schoolhouse Beach. That's the way they are there on St. Martin Island. These particular stones were different. And they puzzled me. Why? What's the deal with these stones? And so I ended up taking all of the pottery, in particular, to the museum in Newark, New Jersey, and I showed them to this curator there. And he's looking at them and he says, this is pottery from the 1850s, 1860s, yes. All of this is pottery. He says, but these stones, I don't know anything about those stones. Oh, okay. So we went to another university nearby, and it's escaped me the name of it. there was a guy that was an expert on Indian artifacts. And I showed him all the stuff. He says, well, I don't know anything about that pottery, but those stones, you can see where they've been hit with the thing and pieces have been chipped off, that the Indians did that to make tools. It's amazing that we found this stuff in the, and I asked him, why did we happen to, run onto quite a few stones like that? Were we just lucky? Well, he says, those Indians lived there for were around there for many, many years. Those stones are probably all over the place. So yes.
Eric and I have an artifact from your artifact search, and that is the sifter, the soil sifter that you use to find out if there was anything in that soil. And I use it when I'm gardening to take the stones out. Thank you.
Yeah, some of the bigger, we took a few bigger artifacts that we couldn't get in the bags, and do you have some of those, Jonathan? Are they around, or I can't remember what happened to some of them. Maybe I have some of them. I can't remember now, but that's interesting. How are we doing time-wise? 7:30, 8:30, about 1 hour. God.
Tanya has a question.
Yes.
So I looked up Lake St. Clair, and I actually started out at Pontiac, and I followed the Clinton River.
That's what it was.
And it goes all the way to Lake St. Clair, and it actually stopped in Pontiac.
Oh.
So that's probably why they stopped in Pontiac.
Oh,
Because that's as far as
could have gone
the river went.
It'd be easy to get up.
Sure, and it looks as if that river is quite wide, quite
Excellent.
accessible.
Okay. Someone else? Yes.
Would you share a little bit more about the mystery of Agnes?
The mystery of Agnes.
Would you share more about the mystery of Agnes?
Of Agnes. What? I have to read my book. It's only 6 bucks. But anyway.
Everybody's read it, everyone knows Agnes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when I
He's gonna sit down.
I'm 91 years old. Well, at 5'6".
Yeah, I knew. Yeah, you knew.
Yes, Agnes. As I was growing up, my mother commented quite a few times about Agnes, that she disappeared, never to be seen again. And wow, what I just had that in the back of my mind, and then when I started doing the genealogy, I run across Agnes, and so I find out when she was born, and she's in the 1905 census. But my understanding was she was disappeared when she was 16, which would have been about 1906. So she disappeared right after that census. And so what I had written about for my book about Agnes was about a half a page. And so as time went on, then we found out, I can't remember now, just what the next thing we found out, but one of the main things is I was in where they had the records for the county of Escanaba and Gladstone, where I grew up, and I was looking in the you know, the births and marriages and all that, and I ran across Agnes Cornell. Oh, wow, what Agnes Cornell is this? Oh, wow, her father was, and this is in the marriage record, her father was William Cornell, and her mother was Hannah, and she was born on Washington Island. There was no doubt this was our Agnes, and so here she had gotten married in Escanaba. It was incredible that here we found her, that she you know, she was in existence for a while. And this was in 1907 when she got married. And so time went on. We didn't find, at some point I found out this guy that she had married had eventually got into Canada and had died there. But we found nothing about Agnes. Well, maybe we can find out something about the guy that she married. Alex Marvin was his name. And so we went to Canada and the town where we found someone, several people that knew Alex Marvin, that knew him when he was in Canada alive. And so we got a lot of information about him. And one of the information was that his wife had a child. Oh, well, that is interesting, yes. And then we talked to somebody else, and we told the story about Agnes missing, and what has happened to her. And this woman who, she was 94 years old at the time, and she was married to Alex's brother. Well, she knew Alex very well. And she said, I wouldn't doubt what he threw her in the lake. Those were, I think, almost the exact words that she knew him, that this would be something that he could have done.
Because he was such a nasty man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he, we found other people that knew him, and we asked, well, what did he do? Well, he didn't do anything. He didn't like to work. Agnes picked a bad guy to marry, and then from that, one other thing, Eric is looking through, the archives. Someone had brought in some archives from a house that
It was a shed or a house that was owned by Jesse Minor
Yeah.
and moved from Washington Harbor to where Valerie Carpenter lives.
Yeah, and of course, Jesse Minor was the stepfather of Agnes.
Right.
So here was papers in Jesse Minor's stuff, but one of the files one of the envelopes with some information in it, it says Arthur Cornell.
The brother.
And of course, Arthur Cornell was Agnes's brother. So Eric opens this thing up, and it says A. Marvin in the hospital in Escanaba. It's a receipt from a time in the hospital that Agnes was in the A. Marvin. Well, who is A. Marvin? Well, this is Agnes married a Marvin. It's certain that it was Agnes.
And Arthur paid the bill.
And Arthur apparently, why would he have the bill if he didn't pay it?
And unfortunately, the hospital records from that time period do not say why somebody was in the hospital. So we don't know if it was a birth, miscarriage, injury. We have no clue. All we know is that Arthur paid the bill.
So anyway, there's a lot more to the story, but we're kind of running late. And if you want to get the rest of the story, I have to read it.
Just one thing I'd like to add, tomorrow, right? You wanted to talk about, it's tomorrow, right? We're leaving?
Tomorrow?
Why don't you just go through of who's going and, on the two, not the names, but there's a 9 o'clock, right?
9 o'clock and about 10 o'clock.
10, okay, and what time do we need to be at the ferry?
Before 9.
9 to 8.
Ferry?
The boat.
The boat. We need to be there, ready to get onto the boat at 9 o'clock.
I get that, so we should all be there what time? 8:45?
42.
Okay.
Well, where's the boat?
Where's the boat?
It's at Jackson Harbor, not where the Carpy is, but the other part.
So it's the first, right?
It's
not
the
second.
first turn in, yes.
Okay. And then, what will happen when we get on the island? Are you planning on giving a little talk, or I know Jonathan has some good information. What would you like us to do?
Well, I think we will probably walk single file, and Jonathan hopefully will lead the way, and I'll be second. And I hope maybe somebody will carry a chair for me that I might need. And we can go single file and the pathway, if there's still a pathway. And hopefully we can find a way to get to the rooms. That's what the desire is. Yes.
So one group's going to be an hour behind you.
We have to do it twice.
I couldn't hear.
You're gonna do 2 tours, kind of?
Well, Dad will not go on the tour. Jonathan and I will stay behind and show you where, because we were there.
Okay.
Wait, I thought he said that Jonathan was gonna walk with Dad. at
Yeah, but when
the
Dad
first
comes
one.
back, Jonathan will still stay, right? You're gonna stay, Jonathan?
He's gonna stay for both tours.
Yeah, I think the things of real interest are the Southwest Village, which you were showing there, which is probably where your family lived, you believe. And then also the cemetery, which is not all that far away, and it's actually kind of over, well, you saw it there, yeah, up there in the map, so it's kind of on the top right, up there, kind of where that circle figure is. And there's a lot of shipments that are buried there. And I think you'll find that many of them died very, very young, not the 90s that we saw from their Cornell family, but some of them, there's like an infant, I think, buried there, as well as some others that were pretty young that are buried up there. But there's, that's of interest up there. And when we were there, it was very well maintained. The Lubers went in and weed whacked it and kind of kept the cemetery kind of in order. I would kind of interested to see what condition it's in when we get there.
What are
tomorrow.
distances here? Like, how far is the walk from the dock up to that's the Southwest settlement?
So over on the west side there, that's considered the Southwest Village. And the little hook that goes out is an old dock. There was wood cribbing there where they would have piled the stones in to kind of make a nice little dock. That's probably, I don't know, from the new dock down at the bottom up to kind of the middle of all those ruins is maybe a quarter mile. And then to go up to the cemetery, you're going through the South Village, which is really all new stuff, newer stuff that Luber built. To go up to the cemetery is probably, a little over a quarter mile to get up there. So it's not real far, but again, it depends on what the conditions are like on the roads. When we were there, it was a real nice kind of Jeep trail that had been cut through there, so the walking was, you didn't have a lot of vegetation. It was kind of a rough trail, but
So we're gonna have to kind of play it by ear depending on.
yeah, we'll see what the vegetation's like tomorrow. I would definitely wear long pants, boots, and bring some bug spray
And
along with you too.
Barbara just suggested maybe even tuck your socks in, if you
Yeah.
have socks, I don't have socks. But
Even more than suggest, make sure that you have, if you have them with you, long pants and tuck them in your socks to avoid getting ticks. Yeah.
No shorts.
Well, you can wear
Or
shorts,
sand-
but
or
then you have
sandals.
to check yourself
Yeah,
for
tick
all those
inspection.
ticks.
Or sandals.
Does everyone know who's going on the first boat and who's going on the second boat? We all know that.
Yes.
But so, Kristen, are you going on the first?
Yeah.
And Jonathan and Dad. So you guys are all going together. So now the second boat, I know Brendan and I are going. I don't know who else is going on the second. Mom's going
Dad
on
will
the
probably
second.
go back, but Jonathan is planning on staying for the two.
I'll go back on the second one. I'll go out on the first and back on the second.
Okay, so when we come in, we're gonna expect to see you there. What if we don't see you? We just wait?
Well, you'll see us because there's people who have to go back on that boat.
So you'll be back by the time our boat comes in?
That's our hope.
Or
You'll
shortly.
go back and do all
Either before or shortly
Or
after.
we'll just wait there then?
Yeah, just-
If we don't see you, we're
just
just
hang out.
gonna wait.
Well, Washington Island, and then I spent
Yeah,
nine
we're
years
gonna,
at